Arthur Munro walked into the lobby of the Grand Regency Hotel with the confidence of a king checking his watch and adjusting his silk tie. Tonight was going to be perfect. First, a boring anniversary dinner with his plain Jane wife to keep up appearances. Then once she was sent home in a cab, the real party would start in the penthouse suite with his mistress Chloe. He thought he was the smartest man in the room. He thought he was playing the system. But Arthur made one fatal calculation. He didn't check the deed to the building. If he had, he would have realized that the woman he was planning to betray didn't just book the table, she owned the entire hotel. And checkout time was coming a lot sooner than he thought. The automatic doors of the Grand Regency slid open with a hushed whisper, admitting Arthur Munro into the chilled, jasmine-scented air of the lobby. He paused for a moment to admire his reflection in the polished brass pillar. At 42, Arthur felt he was in his prime. His suit was tailored, his hair was perfectly gelled, and his bank account, thanks to his wife's family connections, was healthy enough to fund his indiscretions. He approached the reception desk, tapping his platinum credit card on the marble countertop. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, with a stiff posture and terrified eyes, looked up. She seemed to freeze for a fraction of a second before forcing a professional smile. "Good evening, Mr. Munro. Welcome back to the Grand Regency." "I have a reservation," Arthur said, his voice carrying that specific tone of entitlement that made service workers grind their teeth. "Two, actually. Pay close attention because I don't want any screw-ups tonight. It's a very delicate evening." Sarah typed on her keyboard, her eyes darting briefly to the security camera aimed at the desk. "Of course, sir. I see the first reservation. Dinner for two at Le Jardin at 7:00 p.m. Anniversary celebration with Mrs. Vivian Munro." "Correct," Arthur said, leaning in closer, lowering his voice. "And the second, the presidential suite booked for 9:30 p.m. Sarah said, her voice wavering slightly. "Under the name Mr. Smith." Arthur smirked. "Exactly. Listen to me carefully. At dinner, I want the standard house white wine. Nothing fancy. My wife can't tell the difference anyway. But for the suite, I want the 2012 Dom Perignon on ice, waiting by the bed. And rose petals, lots of them, leading from the door to the jacuzzi." Sarah swallowed hard. I will make a note of that, Mr. Munro. Is there anything else?" "Yes, if my wife asks about the suite, tell her it was fully booked. I told her we're just having dinner because money is tight this month." Arthur chuckled, tapping the counter. "After dinner, I'll put her in a taxi, tell her I have an emergency conference call with the Tokyo partners, and then I'll be back for the room key. Do you understand?" "Crystal clear, sir." "Good girl." Arthur snatched his card back. "I'm going to the bar to make a call. Don't keep me waiting when I come back." Arthur turned on his heel and strode toward the hotel bar, unaware that the moment his back was turned, Sarah picked up the landline phone. Her hands were shaking. She dialed a single-digit 1. "He's here, ma'am," Sarah whispered into the receiver. "He ordered the cheap wine for you and the Dom Perignon for the mistress. He's using the Mr. Smith alias for the suite." Arthur, oblivious to the eyes burning into his back, sat on a velvet stool and pulled out his phone. He dialed Chloe. She picked up on the first ring. "Artie." Chloe's voice was high-pitched and sugary. "Are we still on? I bought that red lingerie you like. It cost a fortune, so you better appreciate it." "Baby, you know I'm good for it," Arthur purred, signaling the bartender for a scotch. "Everything is set. I just have to sit through 2 hours of torture with Vivian. She's been nagging me about this anniversary for months. 10 years is a milestone, Arthur, she says. He mocked his wife's soft voice cruelly. I just need to feed her, give her some cheap earrings I bought on sale, and send her packing. Then the night belongs to us. You promise? Chloe asked. I don't want to be waiting in the lobby like a loser. I promise. 9:30 p.m. Walk right in. I'll leave a key for you at the desk under Mrs. Smith. You'll be drinking champagne in the jacuzzi while Vivian is at home knitting or whatever boring women do. Arthur laughed, a sound that echoed in the high ceilings of the bar. He felt invincible. He had the wife who secured his social standing and the mistress who stroked his ego. He took a sip of his scotch, checking his reflection again. What Arthur didn't see was the bartender, a man named Leonard, who had worked at the hotel for 20 years, staring at him with pure venom. Leonard caught the eye of the concierge across the room and gave a subtle nod. The trap wasn't just set. The jaws were already closing. Arthur finished his drink and checked the time. 6:55 p.m. Showtime. He buttoned his jacket and walked toward the entrance of Le Jardin, the hotel's exclusive restaurant. He put on his devoted husband mask, practicing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He saw Vivian sitting at a corner table. She was wearing a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back in a modest bun. She looked small, manageable, predictable. Arthur approached the table, leaning down to kiss her cheek. Happy anniversary, darling. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare. Vivian turned to him. Her eyes, usually warm and forgiving, were different tonight. They were sharp, like shattered glass. But Arthur, in his arrogance, didn't notice. You're right on time, Arthur, Vivian said, her voice smooth and calm. I was just admiring the architecture. It's a beautiful hotel, isn't it? It's decent. Arthur shrugged, sitting down. A bit overpriced, if you ask me. But for you, only the best. Only the best, Vivian echoed, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. I'm glad you feel that way. 3 floors up inside the manager's office, which had been temporarily converted into a command center, Henri, the hotel's general manager, stood stiffly next to a bank of high-definition monitors. Audio is clear, madame, Henri said. We have feeds from the reception, the bar, the restaurant, and the hallway leading to the presidential suite. Standing in front of the screens was a woman who looked nothing like the modest wife Arthur had just greeted downstairs. This was the real Vivian Prescott. She had kept her maiden name, legally a fact Arthur never bothered to check. Up here, Vivian wasn't wearing the dowdy navy dress. She was in a tailored white pantsuit that screamed power. She was watching the live feed of herself, or rather her body, double sitting at the table with Arthur. Wait, you might ask. How? Vivian turned to Henri. My cousin Evelyn is doing a fantastic job, isn't she? From the back with the wig, she looks exactly like me. And Arthur is so self-absorbed, he hasn't even looked her in the eye yet. He barely looked at her at all, ma'am, Henri noted with disdain. He spent the entire interaction checking his phone. Vivian crossed her arms. Let's review the assets, Henri. Yes, ma'am. You purchased the Grand Regency Group 6 months ago using the inheritance from your grandmother, the late Duchess of Cornwall's estate. The acquisition was done through a shell company, Phoenix Holdings. Mr. Monroe believes your grandmother left you a collection of antique teapots and a small cottage in the countryside. He never did respect my family, Vivian murmured, watching the screen where Arthur was currently waving a waiter over with an aggressive snap of his fingers. He thought he married a quiet librarian. He didn't know he married into an empire. The purchase of the hotel hadn't been accidental. 6 months ago, Vivian had found the second phone. It was a classic cliché, hidden in the spare tire compartment of his Audi. The messages were graphic, cruel, and detailed. They detailed how he was spending her money on Chloe, how he planned to leave Vivian once he had secured a loan against their house, a house she paid for. Vivian hadn't cried. She had called her lawyer Beatrice. "I don't just want a divorce, Beatrice," Vivian had said. "I want to dismantle him. I want to take away the lifestyle he loves more than he loves me." When she found out Arthur's favorite love nest with Chloe was the Grand Regency, she didn't just book a room to catch him. She bought the building. "Status on the mistress?" Vivian asked Henry now. "Chloe Summers is currently in a taxi 5 minutes away. She believes she is checking into the presidential suite. However, per your instructions, we have made some adjustments to the room." Vivian smiled. "Did you replace the Dom Perignon?" "Yes, ma'am. The bucket is filled with lukewarm tap water and a bottle of sparkling apple cider. We also replaced the rose petals." "With poison ivy. No, that would be a lawsuit," Henri corrected himself. "We replaced them with printed copies of Mr. Monroe's credit card statements, the ones showing he is over his limit." "Perfect," Vivian said. She pressed a button on the intercom that connected to the earpiece her cousin Evelyn was wearing in the restaurant downstairs. "Evelyn, you're doing great. Initiate Phase 2. Ask him about the investment opportunity he mentioned last week." On the screen, Evelyn nodded slightly. Down in the restaurant, Evelyn, posing as Vivian, cleared her throat. "Arthur, darling, before we order, you mentioned you needed me to sign some papers for that business loan." Arthur's eyes lit up. This was what he was waiting for. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. "Yes, I'm so glad you remembered. It's just a formality, Viv, just to help me expand the marketing firm. I just need your signature here. And here. It puts the cottage up as collateral, but don't worry, it's 0 risk." It was a lie. The business was failing. He was going to use the loan to buy a condo for Chloe. "I see," Evelyn said. "I'll sign it after dessert." "Why wait?" Arthur pressed his smile, tightening. "Because," Evelyn said, reciting the line Vivian fed her through the earpiece, "I have a surprise for you, too. A big one." Arthur rolled his eyes when she looked down at the menu. "Fine. After dessert. But hurry up and order. I have that conference call at 9:30. Back in the control room, Vivian watched Arthur check his reflection in his spoon. "Henri," Vivian said, her voice dropping an octave. "Is the billing system ready?" "Yes, ma'am. We have unlinked his corporate card. He thinks he's paying for this dinner and the suite with his company expense account. But we've rerouted the charge directly to his private debit card, the one that is currently joint with you, and currently has a balance of exactly $12. And the overdraft protection. Disabled as of this morning." "Excellent." Vivian straightened her blazer. "I'm going down. Evelyn can only stall for so long. It's time for the real wife to make an entrance." "Shall I call security?" Henri asked. "Have them on standby, but don't intervene unless I say so. I want to see the look on his face when the owner of the hotel asks him to leave." Vivian walked out of the office, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. She took the private elevator, the one that required a retinal scan, down to the lobby. As the elevator descended, Vivian checked her phone. A text from Beatrice, her lawyer. "Papers are ready. Asset freeze is active in 10 minutes." The elevator doors pinged open. Vivian stepped into the lobby. She didn't look like the woman Arthur left at home. She had let her hair down in cascading waves, applied a bold red lipstick, and the white suit was sharp enough to cut glass. She saw Chloe entering through the revolving doors. The mistress was wearing a trench coat that was too short and heels that were too high. Chloe marched to the desk. "Reservation for Smith," Chloe snapped at Sarah. "Presidential suite." Sarah looked up, then looked past Chloe to see Vivian approaching from the elevators. Sarah gave a tiny nod to Vivian. "I'm sorry, miss," Sarah said loudly. "There seems to be a problem with the payment on that room. The card was declined." "What?" Chloe shrieked. "That's impossible. Arthur, I mean Mr. Smith is loaded." "Try it again." "I have tried it 3 times," Sarah said calmly. "Perhaps you should go ask him. He's in the restaurant." Vivian stopped in the middle of the lobby, watching the chaos begin. Chloe's face turned red. She spun around and began marching toward Le Jardin, her heels clacking furiously. Vivian followed a silent predator stalking her prey. Arthur was about to have his appetizers interrupted by a very spicy main course. Inside Le Jardin, the atmosphere was one of refined elegance. Crystal chandeliers, tinkling on softly the murmur of polite conversation, the gentle clink of silver against porcelain. But at table 12, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Arthur was growing increasingly agitated. The woman he believed to be his wife, Vivian, was taking an eternity to finish her risotto. She was eating grain by grain, staring out the window, completely ignoring the loan documents he had pushed toward her. "Vivian," Arthur hissed, leaning over the table. "The ink isn't going to dry itself. I need that signature now. I have that call in 15 minutes. Evelyn, still wearing the wig that matched Vivian's mousy brown bun perfectly, took a slow sip of water. "You know, Arthur, I was thinking about the time you forgot my birthday 3 years ago. You said you were in Chicago for a conference." Arthur groaned, rolling his eyes. "Why are we bringing up ancient history? I bought you that thing, that blender, to make up for it." "A blender?" Evelyn repeated, her voice flat. "Yes, while you were actually in Miami with your secretary Jessica." Arthur froze. His fork clattered onto his plate. "What did you say?" "I said homo." Evelyn raised her voice slightly. "Miami. Jessica. The Fontainebleau Hotel. Room 404. Arthur's face drained of color. He looked around nervously to see if anyone was listening. "Lower your voice. You're delusional." "I was working." "You were working on a tan, Arthur," Evelyn said. Before Arthur could concoct a lie, the sound of rapid, angry footsteps pierced the quiet hum of the restaurant. Heads turned. A waiter gasped and jumped out of the way as Chloe Summers, looking like a hurricane in a trench coat, stormed through the dining room. Arthur heard the commotion and turned around, irritated that someone was disturbing his dinner. When he saw who it was, his irritation turned to pure, unadulterated horror. It was Chloe, and she was looking right at him. No, Arthur thought, his heart hammering against his ribs. Not here. Not now. It's too early. She's supposed to be in the suite. He stood up, waving his hands frantically, trying to signal her to leave, to turn around, to do anything but come to the table. But Chloe was past the point of subtlety. She was humiliated, she was sober, and she wanted answers. "Arthur!" She shrieked, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. The entire restaurant went silent. The pianist stopped playing mid-chord. Arthur's face turned a deep shade of crimson. He looked at Evelyn, who was calmly buttering a roll, then back at Chloe. Excuse me," he stammered to Evelyn. "I think there's been a mistake." He tried to intercept Chloe near the dessert cart. "Chloe, what the hell are you doing?" he whispered furiously, grabbing her arm. "You're ruining everything I said, 30. Chloe yanked her arm away. "The card declined, Arthur." The card declined 3 times. The receptionist looked at me like I was a beggar off the street. "That's impossible," Arthur hissed. "It's a corporate card. It has a $50,000 limit." "Well, it has a $0 limit now," Chloe shouted, not caring who heard. "And they won't let me into the suite without a deposit. You left me standing there like an idiot while you're here, stuffing your face with—" She looked past him and saw the woman sitting at the table. With her. Chloe marched past Arthur up to the table. She glared down at Evelyn. "So this is the famous Vivian," Chloe sneered. "He talks about you, you know. Says you're as exciting as watching paint dry. Says he only stays for the money." Arthur rushed over looking like a man trying to put out a forest fire with a water pistol. "Chloe, stop, Vivian. Don't listen to her. She's a disgruntled former employee. She's mentally unstable." Evelyn slowly placed her napkin on the table. She looked up at Chloe, then at Arthur. Then, very deliberately, she reached up to her head. With a swift motion, she pulled off the wig. Cascading blonde hair tumbled down completely, unlike Vivian's style. She pulled off her glasses and wiped away the makeup that had created the illusion of Vivian's tired eyes. Arthur stumbled back, gripping the back of a chair for support. Who are you?" "I'm Evelyn," she said, her voice changing from the soft mimicry of Vivian to her natural, sharper tone. "Vivian's cousin, the one you called the ugly one at the wedding." Arthur's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Where is Vivian?" I believe a cool, commanding voice came from the entrance of the restaurant. "That is my cue." Arthur whipped around. Standing in the archway of the restaurant was the real Vivian, but it was a Vivian he didn't recognize. The woman standing there radiated authority. The white suit was impeccable, her posture was regal, and her eyes held a cold, hard glint of triumph. She was flanked by Henri, the hotel manager, and 2 large security guards. She walked slowly toward the table, the crowd parting for her instinctively. She stopped 3 feet from Arthur, looking him up and down with an expression of mild disgust. "Hello, Arthur," she said. "Happy anniversary." Arthur looked between the 3 women, the mistress, the decoy, and the wife. His brain was misfiring. "Vivian, you set me up. I knew about Jessica in Miami." Vivian listed ticking off fingers. "I knew about Sarah in accounting last year, and I certainly know about Chloe, who apparently enjoys maxing out credit cards that don't belong to her." Chloe, realizing she was losing control of the narrative, tried to pivot. "Listen, lady. I didn't know he was married. I mean, I knew. But he said you were separated. Quiet, dear." Vivian silenced her without even looking at her. "The adults are talking." Arthur tried to regain his composure. He straightened his jacket, trying to summon the arrogance that had carried him through life so far. "Okay, fine. You caught me. So what, I'll move out. We'll get a divorce. But you can't make a scene here, Vivian. People are watching. This is humiliating for you." "Humiliating for me." Vivian laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Arthur, look around." Arthur looked. Every patron in the restaurant had their phone out. They were recording. "You care so much about your image," Vivian said. "Say hello to the internet." "I'm leaving," Arthur snapped. "Chloe, come on. We're going to the Hyatt." "You're not going anywhere." Henri, the manager, stepped forward, blocking Arthur's path. "Excuse me," Arthur barked. "I'm a paying customer. I demand you let me leave." "Actually," Henri said, checking a tablet in his hand, "you aren't a paying customer. As Ms. Summers pointed out, your cards have been declined. All of them. The dinner bill currently stands at $400, plus the bottle of scotch you had at the bar, plus the reservation cancellation fee for the suite. Arthur scoffed. I have cash. He reached for his wallet. He opened it. It was empty. He froze. My cash. I had $500 in here this morning. Vivian smirked. Did you spend it on that bracelet for Chloe? The one she's wearing right now. I saw the receipt in your jacket pocket while you were in the shower yesterday. Chloe instinctively covered her wrist. So, Henri said, crossing his arms, how do you intend to pay Mr. Monroe? We have a very strict policy regarding theft of services. The air in the restaurant was electric. Arthur Monroe, usually the man who commanded boardrooms, or at least pretended to, was now sweating profusely under the warm glow of the chandeliers. This is ridiculous, Arthur sputtered, trying to push past Henri. Put it on my tab. I've stayed here a dozen times. You know who I am. We know exactly who you are, Henri said, not moving an inch. You are Arthur Monroe, a man with 0 credit rating, a frozen bank account, and a pending lawsuit for fraud. Fraud, Arthur yelled. I haven't committed fraud. Not yet, Vivian interjected, stepping closer. She picked up the loan documents Arthur had been trying to get Evelyn to sign. She held them up to the light. But this is interesting. She scanned the paper. You told my double that this was a loan for your marketing firm to expand. But if you read the fine print on page 4, paragraph 3, Vivian put on a pair of reading glasses she pulled from her pocket. It says that the signatory agrees to transfer full title of the property located at 42 Oak Drive, my grandmother's cottage, to Monroe Ventures, LLC, for the sum of $1. The room gasped. Even Chloe looked shocked. You were trying to steal my house, Vivian said, her voice dangerously quiet. You weren't taking a loan against it. You were transferring the deed to yourself so you could sell it out from under me. Arthur's knees went weak. It was a protective measure for tax purposes. Save it for the judge, Vivian said, ripping the document in half. The sound of tearing paper was satisfyingly loud. She dropped the pieces onto his plate of half-eaten risotto. Now, Vivian continued, about that bill. I'll write a check, Arthur shouted. We don't accept checks from accounts that have been flagged for suspicious activity, Henri said smoothly. And Mrs. Monroe called the bank this morning to report that her joint account had been compromised by a third party. Arthur glared at Vivian. You froze the joint account. That's my money, too. Actually, Vivian corrected him, that account was funded 90% by my inheritance and 10% by your salary, which you mostly spent on gambling and gifts for women like Chloe. So I simply withdrew my 90%. I left you your share. It was... Let me check. She pulled out her phone. $12.50. Enjoy. Chloe let out a screech of indignation. You're broke. You told me you were a millionaire. I am, Arthur insisted, turning to his mistress. She's lying. She's just a vindictive housewife. Arthur, Vivian said, her voice cutting through his panic. Stop screaming. You're disturbing the guests. I don't care about the guests, Arthur roared, losing all control. I want to speak to the owner. Right now. Get the owner of this hotel down here. I'm going to have you all fired. I'll sue this place into the ground. He pointed a shaking finger at Henri. Get me the owner. Henri looked at Arthur with a mixture of pity and amusement. He slowly turned his head to look at Vivian. He bowed his head slightly. Madame, Henri said, he wishes to speak with you. Arthur stopped breathing. He looked at Henri. Then he looked at Vivian. "What?" Arthur whispered. Vivian took a step forward. The heels of her shoes clicked on the parquet floor like gavel strikes. "You want to speak to the owner, Arthur?" Vivian asked, a small, cruel smile playing on her lips. "You're looking at her." Arthur blinked his brain, unable to process the information. "No, that's impossible. You're a librarian. You have a grandmother who collects teapots." "My grandmother," Vivian said, "was the Duchess of Cornwall's second cousin. And she didn't just leave me a cottage. She left me a portfolio. When I found out about your affair, 6 months ago, I decided to diversify my assets." She spread her arms, gesturing to the opulent room around them. "I bought the Grand Regency Group 3 months ago, Arthur. Every time you brought Chloe here, you were paying me. Every drink you ordered, profit for me. Every time you tipped the valet to keep your secret, he came straight to me and reported it." Arthur felt the room spinning. He looked at Sarah, the receptionist who had come to the doorway. She waved. He looked at the bartender in the distance. He raised a glass. You own the hotel," Arthur croaked. "I own the hotel," Vivian confirmed. "I own the restaurant. I own the bar. I own the very chair you are standing next to. And frankly, Arthur, you are trespassing." Chloe, realizing the ship was sinking fast, tried to distance herself. She started to back away. "I didn't know, I swear. He told me he was single." "Security," Vivian said calmly. 2 large men in dark suits stepped forward. "Escort Ms. Summers out," Vivian ordered. "She is banned from all Regency properties for life. If she returns, call the police for trespassing." "You can't do this!" Chloe screamed as a guard grabbed her arm. "I have rights. My purse is in the suite. Your purse is at the front desk," Sarah called out. "We packed it for you." As Chloe was dragged out, kicking and screaming, Arthur stood alone. He looked small. He looked defeated. But his ego wouldn't let him die gracefully. "You can't kick me out," Arthur sneered, trying to rally. "We are married. What's yours is mine. If you own this hotel, then we own this hotel. I'm not going anywhere." Vivian laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time. "Oh, Arthur, you really should have read the prenup." "We didn't sign a prenup," Arthur shouted. "I remember I refused." "You refused the first draft," Vivian said. "But the night before the wedding, when you were hungover, you signed a stack of vendor contracts I gave you. One of them wasn't for the florist." Arthur's face went pale grey. "But that's not even the best part," Vivian said, checking her watch. "The best part is what's waiting for you outside." "What?" Arthur asked, fear creeping into his voice. "I mentioned you were using the corporate card for personal expenses, right?" Vivian said. "Well, your business partner, Dave. He's a good friend of mine. I called him yesterday. I sent him the itemized receipts of everything you've charged to the company account over the last year. The hotels, the jewelry, the trips." Arthur grabbed the tablecloth. "No. Dave was not happy," Vivian said. "In fact, he was so unhappy he called the police. Embezzlement is a serious crime, Arthur." Sirens began to wail in the distance, getting louder with every second. Blue and red lights began to flash against the large bay windows of the restaurant. "You planned this," Arthur whispered, tears of rage filling his eyes. "You planned every second of this." "For 6 months," Vivian nodded. "I wanted to make sure our 10th anniversary was unforgettable." Henri stepped forward. "The police are at the entrance, madame." "Excellent," Vivian said. She looked at Arthur. "Now get out of my hotel." Arthur looked at the door, then back at Vivian. He lunged. Driven by blind fury, Arthur lunged across the table, reaching for Vivian's throat. "I'll kill you, you witch!" He didn't make it 2 steps. The security guard, who had been standing silently behind him, tackled Arthur to the ground with professional efficiency. A heavy boot pressed into Arthur's back, pinning him to the expensive carpet. "Get off me!" Arthur screamed, his face pressed against the floor. "Keep him there," Vivian said coolly, looking down at her husband. She didn't flinch. She simply picked up her glass of wine, a vintage Pinot Noir, and took a slow, deliberate sip. "Henri," she said, turning to the manager. "Yes, madame. I think the carpet is ruined. Send the bill to Mr. Monroe's lawyer, assuming he can afford one." The transition from the plush, velvet-carpeted floors of the Grand Regency to the cold, hard plastic of the police cruiser's back seat was a shock to Arthur Monroe's system. His hands, usually accustomed to holding crystal tumblers of scotch or the steering wheel of his Audi, were now cuffed tightly behind his back. The metal bit into his wrists, a physical reminder of his sudden and violent fall from grace. "You're making a mistake," Arthur yelled at the mesh partition, separating him from the officers in the front. "Do you know who I am?" "I know the commissioner. I played golf with him last summer." Officer Miller, a grizzled veteran who had seen men like Arthur 1,000 times before, didn't even turn his head. Yeah, and I played poker with the Pope. Sit tight, Mr. Monroe. You're facing charges of embezzlement, fraud, and assault. The commissioner isn't going to help you with that." As the cruiser pulled away, Arthur pressed his face against the window. He saw the Hotel Vivian's hotel shining like a jewel in the night. He saw the valet parking the cars of guests who were not in handcuffs. He saw the life he was supposed to be living. Meanwhile, back inside the manager's office, the atmosphere was one of controlled chaos. Vivian sat behind the large mahogany desk, the adrenaline beginning to fade, replaced by a deep, weary satisfaction. Henri placed a cup of herbal tea in front of her. "The police have taken the statements, madame. The footage of Mr. Monroe attempting to strangle you has been secured and transferred to the district attorney's office. It is compelling evidence." "Thank you, Henri," Vivian said, taking a sip. Her hands were steady. "And the guests in the restaurant were entertained," Henri admitted with a small smile. "We offered a round of complimentary desserts as an apology for the disturbance. No one complained. In fact, I believe several people were live streaming the arrest. You are trending on Twitter, madame. # the wife wins is currently the #1 hashtag in the city." Vivian sighed, leaning back in the leather chair. "I didn't want fame, Henri. I just wanted freedom. But I suppose in this world, sometimes you have to burn the house down to get the rats out." "Speaking of rats," Henri said, "Ms. Summers is currently in the lobby screaming at the concierge. She is demanding we return the shoes she left in the suite. Apparently, they are Louboutins." "Put them in a trash bag," Vivian said coldly, "and leave them on the curb. She can dig for them. She can dig for them." An hour later, Vivian was joined by her lawyer, a sharp-featured man named Preston Gould. Preston was known in the city as the Shark for a reason. He didn't just win cases, he devoured the opposition. He walked into the office carrying a thick briefcase, looking far too cheerful for 1100 p.m. on a Tuesday. "Vivian," Preston said, shaking her hand, "I just got off the phone with the DA. They are throwing the book at him. Dave, your husband's business partner, provided a spreadsheet of the embezzled funds that is 40 pages long. Arthur wasn't just skimming off the top. He was draining the company dry to fund that condo down payment for the mistress." "Does Arthur know about the condo evidence?" Vivian asked. "Not yet. Preston grinned, revealing perfectly whitened teeth. He thinks he's just facing a little misunderstanding. He has no idea we found the hidden email account where he was negotiating the purchase under the alias Artie King. Good, Vivian said. I want him to have hope, Preston, and then I want you to crush it in front of the judge. Across town, the reality of the situation was settling in for Arthur. The holding cell at the 4th Precinct smelled of bleach and unwashed bodies. He was sitting on a metal bench, his suit jacket wrinkled, his tie confiscated. He was allowed one phone call. He had thought about calling his mother, but she would just lecture him. He thought about calling Chloe. But after the scene in the restaurant, he knew that Bridge wasn't just burned. It was nuked. So he dialed his best friend and golfing buddy, Greg. Greg was a corporate lawyer. Greg would know what to do. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. Hello? Greg's voice finally answered, sounding groggy. Greg? Thank God, Arthur whispered, clutching the receiver. It's Artie. I'm in trouble, man. Big trouble. Vivian, she went crazy. She set me up. I'm at the 4th Precinct. I need you to come down here and represent me, or bail me out. I need 50 grand. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Greg, Arthur. Greg said, his voice cold and distant. Don't call this number again. What, Greg? It's me. We're playing in the tournament next weekend. We're not playing anything, Arthur, Greg snapped. Vivian called me an hour ago. She showed me the texts where you bragged about sleeping with my sister at the Christmas party last year. Arthur's blood ran cold. He had forgotten about that. Greg, that was just talk. Locker room talk. My sister confirmed it, Greg said. Lose my number, and if you try to contact me or my family again, I'll add a harassment suit to your pile of problems. Click. The dial tone hummed in Arthur's ear. He stared at the phone, stunning realization washing over him. Vivian hadn't just taken his money. She hadn't just taken his freedom. She had systematically dismantled his entire social network. She had gotten to everyone. He sat back down on the cold bench, putting his head in his hands. For the first time in his life, Arthur Monroe was completely, utterly alone. 3 days later, the arraignment of Arthur Monroe was the hottest ticket in town. The story of the anniversary ambush had gone viral, and the courtroom was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and former associates of Arthur who wanted to see the train wreck in person. Arthur walked into the courtroom wearing an orange jumpsuit. His request to wear a suit had been denied because his assets were frozen, and no one had bothered to bring him one from home. He looked haggard. He hadn't slept in 72 hours. The jail soap had dried out his skin, and without his hair gel he looked 10 years older. He scanned the front row. There, sitting calmly with her hands folded in her lap, was Vivian. She looked radiant in a navy blue dress, projecting the image of the dignified, grieving wife who had been wronged. Next to her was Preston Gould, looking like a predator smelling blood. Arthur had been assigned a public defender, a young, overworked man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week either. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honourable Judge Harrington presiding. Judge Harrington was a stern woman with a reputation for zero tolerance regarding white-collar crime. She took her seat and peered over her glasses at Arthur. Mr. Monroe. Judge Harrington began, her voice echoing in the silent room. You are charged with 1 count of grand larceny, 1 count of assault, and 24 counts of wire fraud. How do you plead? Not guilty, Arthur shouted before his lawyer could stand up. This is a setup. My wife is behind this. Mr. Henderson winced and pulled Arthur down by his sleeve. Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty. Very well, Judge Harrington said. We will move to bail. Mr. Prosecutor. The prosecutor stood up. Your Honor, the state requests bail be denied. Mr. Monroe is a flight risk. He has made multiple mentions in seized emails about moving to a non-extradition country if his business ventures failed. Furthermore, he has no ties to the community anymore, as his wife has filed for divorce, and restraining orders have been issued by his former business partners. Objection! Arthur yelled again. I have ties. I own a house. Preston Gould stood up from the gallery, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, if I may speak on behalf of the victim, Mrs. Vivian Monroe. Proceed, Mr. Gould. Thank you. Regarding the house Mr. Monroe refers to, Preston said, pulling a document from his briefcase. My client, Mrs. Monroe, is the sole owner of the property at 42 Oak Drive. As of this morning, she has changed the locks and listed the property for rent. Mr. Monroe has no legal claim to the residence, as evidenced by the deed which has been in the Prescott family for 3 generations. Mr. Monroe simply lived there. Rent-free, I might add. Laughter rippled through the courtroom. Arthur turned purple. Furthermore, Preston continued, the defense claims Mr. Monroe has assets. However, forensic accounting shows that Mr. Monroe's personal accounts are overdrawn by $40,000. His credit cards are maxed out. He is, for all intents and purposes, destitute. Judge Harrington nodded. Bail is set at $1 million. Next case. $1 million, Arthur gasped. I don't have that, Vivian. Vivian, help me. You can't leave me in there. Arthur turned to look at his wife. Desperation clawing at his throat. He expected to see anger. He expected to see hate. But Vivian just looked at him with a blank, indifferent expression. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She looked at him the way one looks at a stranger on the bus. As the bailiffs dragged him away, Arthur saw someone else in the back row. It was Chloe. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a hat trying to be incognito. But as Arthur passed her, she lowered her glasses. Chloe, Arthur cried out. Chloe, you have to testify for me. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Chloe looked at him. Then she looked at Vivian. Vivian gave her a barely perceptible nod. I'm testifying for the prosecution, Arthur, Chloe said, her voice cutting through the noise. They offered me immunity if I explained how you forged the company checks. Sorry, babe. I don't look good in orange. Arthur's legs gave out. The bailiffs had to physically carry him out of the doors. The trial that followed 2 months later was less of a legal battle and more of a public execution. Preston Gould was merciless. He called witness after witness. First came Dave, the business partner. Arthur was like a brother to me, Dave told the jury, his voice trembling with anger. And then I found out he was charging client dinners that were actually weekend getaways to Cabo with Ms. Summers. He stole nearly $500,000 from our operating budget. We almost had to lay off staff because of him. Then came Sarah, the receptionist from the hotel. Mr. Monroe was verbally abusive, Sarah testified. He instructed me to lie to his wife. He tried to use a company card for a personal suite. He was arrogant and cruel. Then came the digital forensics expert. They projected Arthur's text messages onto a giant screen for the jury to see. The texts where he called Vivian boring. The texts where he called Dave a gullible idiot. The texts where he planned to dump the old ball and chain once he secured the loan on the house. Every word Arthur had written in secret was now being read aloud by a court clerk in a monotone voice. The jury looked at Arthur with open disgust, but the final nail in the coffin was Vivian herself. When Vivian took the stand, the room went silent. She didn't play the victim. She played the CEO. "Mrs. Monroe," the prosecutor asked, "when did you discover your husband's infidelity?" "6 months ago," Vivian stated clearly. "And why did you wait so long to confront him?" "Because," Vivian said, looking directly at Arthur, "I am a businesswoman. You don't liquidate an asset until you have secured the maximum return on investment. I needed to ensure that when I left Arthur, I took everything that was rightfully mine. He spent 10 years spending my money and underestimating my intelligence. I spent 6 months ensuring he would never do it again." "Did you entrap him?" Mr. Henderson, the public defender, tried to ask in cross-examination. "By buying the hotel." Vivian smiled. It was the same dangerous smile she had worn in the restaurant. "Mr. Henderson, I simply invested in real estate. Is it my fault that my husband chose my hotel to conduct his affair? Is it my fault he chose to commit fraud in my restaurant? I didn't force him to do any of those things. I just provided the venue." The jury deliberated for less than an hour. "Guilty," the foreman read, "on all counts." Judge Harrington looked at Arthur. He was slumped in his chair, a broken man. "Arthur Monroe," Judge Harrington said, "you have displayed a level of greed and narcissism that is truly staggering. You betrayed your wife, your business partner, and the law. I sentence you to 8 years in state prison, followed by 10 years of probation. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $450,000 to your former company." The gavel banged. The sound was like a gunshot ending Arthur's life. As he was led away in handcuffs, heading toward a transport bus that would take him to a maximum security facility, Arthur looked back one last time. The courtroom was emptying, but Vivian was still there. She was standing with Preston Gould shaking his hand. Then she turned and walked out of the double doors, her head held high, stepping into a future that was entirely her own. Arthur realized then that he had never really known his wife at all. He had married a quiet girl, but he had divorced a tycoon. The heavy oak doors of the courthouse swung shut behind Vivian, muffling the chaotic din of the trial. Outside, the air was crisp, smelling of rain and asphalt. A throng of reporters waited at the bottom of the concrete steps, microphones bristling like a hedge of thorns. "Mrs. Monroe." "How do you feel?" one shouted. "Is it true you're selling the hotel?" Vivian paused at the top of the stairs, adjusting her sunglasses. She didn't shrink away. She stepped up to the nearest microphone, the cameras clicking in a rhythmic, shutter-speed applause. "My name," she said, her voice steady and amplified across the plaza, "is Ms. Prescott, and I have no comment for the inmate. My only comment is for anyone who thinks they are trapped or powerless." She leaned in closer to the lens. "Check the bank accounts, check the phone bills, and never ever let anyone tell you that you are just a spectator in your own life. Sometimes you have to be the owner." With that, she descended the stairs, flanked by Preston Gould and her security team. She slipped into the back of a waiting black limousine. As the door closed, sealing her in the quiet luxury of leather and tinted glass, Vivian finally let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 10 years. She picked up her phone, navigated to the contact named Husband, and pressed delete. "Where to, Ms. Prescott?" the driver asked. Vivian smiled, watching the city blur past. "Home, and then to the bank. I have a hotel to renovate." 1 year later, the Grand Regency Hotel. The Grand Regency was no longer just a hotel. It was a landmark. Under Vivian's leadership, the stuffy aesthetic had been replaced by bright, contemporary elegance. Tonight was the Phoenix Gala, celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the new ownership. The ballroom was a sea of silk diamonds and tuxedos. Vivian stood on the balcony overlooking the dance floor, wearing a gown of emerald green silk, a stark contrast to the invisible navy dresses of her past. She held a flute of vintage champagne. "It's a good turnout," a voice said beside her. It was Henri, now the vice president of operations. His suit was sharper, his posture proud. "We raised $2 million for the women's shelter tonight, and the signature cocktail, the alimony, is the best seller at the bar." Vivian laughed softly. "I thought it was a bit on the nose, but the marketing team insisted. Bitter lemon with a sweet finish." "Madame." Henri hesitated, his tone softening. "There is a letter. It arrived this morning, from the State Correctional Facility." Vivian's smile didn't falter, but her eyes cooled. She took a slow sip of champagne. "Burn it." "You don't want to read it?" "I know what it says," Vivian replied, looking out over the party. "It says he's sorry. It says he misses the comfort. It says he's changed. It's a script, Henri, and I've already cancelled that show." Henri smiled with genuine admiration. "Consider it burned." "Oh, and I saw an old acquaintance today, Ms. Summers." "Chloe." Vivian raised an eyebrow. She was delivering a food order to the front desk for a guest. She works for a delivery app now. She tried to come in, but security escorted her out. She looked quite tired. Vivian felt a flicker of acknowledgement. The universe had balanced the scales. "Everyone lands where they belong, eventually," she said. A handsome man in a tuxedo approached them, the architect for her new Bali resort. He had kind eyes and his own fortune. "Ms. Prescott," he said, offering a hand. "They're playing a waltz. I was hoping I could steal the owner for a dance." Vivian looked at his hand, then at the ballroom filled with her success. "You can try," Vivian smiled, placing her hand in his. "But be warned, I always lead." State Correctional Facility, Block C, 300 miles away. The atmosphere was suffocating. Arthur Monroe sat on the edge of a thin, lumpy mattress that smelled of mildew. His cellmate, a large man named Tiny, snored loudly on the top bunk. Arthur looked at his reflection in the scratched metal mirror. The tan was gone, replaced by a prison pallor. He had aged 10 years in 12 months. The small television mounted outside the bars was blaring the evening news. "And live from the Grand Regency, we are seeing the arrival of the city's elite for the Phoenix Gala, hosted by business tycoon Vivian Prescott." Arthur rushed to the bars, gripping the cold steel until his knuckles turned white. On the screen, he saw her. Vivian. She was laughing, throwing her head back, looking more beautiful and alive than he had ever seen her. She was talking to a man who looked at her with total reverence. "That's my wife," Arthur whispered, his voice cracking. That was my wife." "Shut up, Monroe," a voice yelled from across the hall. "Nobody cares." Arthur slid down the bars until he hit the concrete floor, pulling his knees to his chest. He remembered the anniversary night, the arrogance, the sheer audacity of bringing Chloe to Vivian's hotel. He realized now that Vivian hadn't just owned the building. She had owned the situation from the first text message. She had let him dig his own grave, handed him the shovel, and watched patiently while he jumped in. The news segment ended. "It's going to be a cold night," the weatherman said cheerfully. Arthur shivered, pulling his scratchy blanket around his shoulders. He looked at the empty space on his finger, where his wedding ring used to be, the ring he used to take off whenever he entered a bar. Now he would give anything to have it back. But the ring, the money, the house, and the woman were gone forever. Arthur closed his eyes as the sound of the prison locking down echoed down the corridor. The heavy clank of metal on metal, sounding exactly like the closing of a book. And that is the story of how Arthur Monroe learned the most expensive lesson of his life. Never underestimate the person you sleep next to. He thought Vivian was just a quiet wife he could manipulate, but he failed to realize that while he was playing checkers, she was playing 4D chess, and she owned the board. It's a brutal reminder that karma doesn't always come instantly. Sometimes it waits. It gathers receipts, it buys hotels, and it strikes when the check comes due. Arthur lost his freedom and his fortune, while Vivian turned her heartbreak into an empire. What do you think? Did Vivian go too far with the public humiliation, or did Arthur get exactly what he deserved? And what would you do if you found out your partner was cheating? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal and ultimate revenge, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to share this with a friend who loves a good drama, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss the next crazy real-life story. Thanks for watching.